Good morning, everyone. It's Phil Wade with Dalton Wade Real Estate Group. Today we're here with Amy holding the phone.
Hi.
Claren for moral support. And Lisa
Hi.
is going to actually lead the training. Just kidding.
That's
Alrighty. So today we're going to talk about the two contingencies that buyers receive when their offer's been accepted. We've talked about this before, but I keep getting questions about it that sometimes makes me feel that not everyone out there is, kind of clear on exactly sort of how it all works. So the two contingencies typically are, Claren?
The home inspection and the appraisal.
The
Is that what
financing.
you're looking for?
The financing.
Oh, okay.
If
Home inspection and financing.
Home inspection and financing. So unless they're a cash buyer, then there's just the one contingency. But if they're getting a loan, there's two. So basically, so we'll talk first about the home inspection. And again, why the contingencies are important is because your client has put down either one deposit or a second deposit. So typically, their deposits are at risk, meaning if you're not paying attention to the contingency dates, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, the seller can potentially keep their deposit, which would be really bad and totally avoidable. So it really should never happen. But so understanding these two contingencies is important when working with the buyer. So first, the home inspection contingency. So basically that's on the as-is contract, that's paragraph or number 12. I encourage everybody to read it. It is very self-explanatory, but again, I'll give you the the abbreviated version right now. So basically, the as-is contract, the person is buying the home as is with the right to inspect it. So the seller is under no obligation to actually change the offer, give the buyer anything, make any repairs, reduce the price, increase the closing cost credit. None of that. That all has to sort of be negotiated and then ultimately agreed to by both parties. So what typically happens is that when you get down to the last day, so say it's a 10-day inspection period or a 15-day inspection period, when you get to that point, you have to have agreed with the seller or the seller's agent in writing a signed addendum lowering the purchase price if there's going to be a repair list. And we always recommend lowering the purchase price or making a closing cost credit as opposed to doing repairs, because sometimes the seller's work may not be quite as up to snuff as the buyer would like. It can be confusing in terms of what exactly they're going to do, and when you get to sort of the final walkthrough, it can potentially cause some issues. But that's kind of another discussion. But in terms of the so you have unequivocally, unilaterally, the ability for your client to walk away. They don't even have to do an inspection. They can just be having a bad day and say, I don't want to buy this house anymore. They get their deposit back. So, but once you go beyond that date, so if it's 10 days and the effective date, say, is today, June 11th, then on June 21st, it's the last day of the inspection period. If you haven't agreed and it goes beyond that, then the inspection contingency is ended, waived, gone, no longer in existence. And then if for some reason your client didn't want to buy the house at that point, they would lose their deposit. So where it gets tricky?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, go ahead.
So on that one where it's 10 days?
Yeah.
So you start counting, if
The
it's
next
the
day.
11th, you start counting the next day?
Right, that's the first day. So it's the effective day plus 10. So it's the effective days. Today's the effective day. The 12th would be the first day, and then you count the 10 days, and that's your last day. So that's how that works. So, but on the last day, if you're still negotiating, so I'll just give you an example. I had a property. I'm representing the buyer. The roof was shot. We ended up getting $10,000 off. Both the buyer and the seller agreed to the $10,000. It was the last day of we had a 4-day inspection period, so it was very, very short. But both parties agreed. But then when I sent over, so the buyer signed the addendum lowering the price by $10,000. the seller had told me verbally, or the agent, we're all good to go. But when I sent her over the addendum, what I sent over was, here's the addendum signed by the buyer, lowering the price by $10,000. Even though they verbally had told me, if the seller doesn't sign this, we're canceling the contract. So in your email, the words canceling the contract have to be there. If you put those words in there, then, so for instance, if the seller in this case had a change of heart, decided, for whatever reason they weren't going to sign it, the buyer gets their money back because we were canceling the contract. So that's the key word, canceling the contract. Now, again, so if you're negotiating, you don't have it all ironed out, and you get to the last day, you need to send a letter or an email to the listing agent saying, this is what we want, and if we don't get this, we're canceling the contract. And that protects your buyer. If you don't end up agreeing, they get their deposit back. Everyone clear on that?
I think so.
Any questions? Cool. So that's the inspection contingency. So the operative words are canceling the contract. Now, the financing contingency, unfortunately, is a little bit more tricky. Not that it's tricky, but so again, that's number 8. So if you read number 8, where you check off financing, FHA, VA, conventional, and then it says, okay, in X number of days, they're going to have a loan commitment. So say the closing is in 45 days, and then the default is 45 days, they have to have their loan. So you would think, oh, well, I'm covered with the financing contingency right up to the closing. But if you actually read all of number 8, it says that you have to have a commitment that they have to have their loan the lesser of the 45 days that you defaulted to, or 7 days prior to closing. So typically and usually 7 days prior to closing, they have to have their loan. So once that date goes by, so if you were going to close in 45 days, so on day 38, you need to call the lender and actually put the onus on them and say, hey, look, are you going to be able to, is this going to happen? And depending on kind of what's left, they're going to tell you, and then you have to talk with your client. If the appraisal's not back, you may definitely ask for an extension of that financing period, or if the seller's unwilling to give it to you, you're canceling the contract. And again, this is one you would definitely want to be, talking with your buyer about, because and explaining to them how this works. Sometimes when I'm talking to some folks and I'm not getting the warm and fuzzy that they really understand how this works, it makes it difficult. How are they going to actually explain it to their client if they don't understand it? So it's important that, so on day 38, if the closing is 45 days after the effective date, on day 38 is the last day of their financing. If they don't get, and then so on day 39, effectively they're a cash buyer now. So they don't have a financing contingency anymore. They've waived that. They let that go. They don't have that. So now, if for some reason they don't get the loan, they've lost their deposit. So that's really what we're trying to do, is always protect the deposit. So on day 38, you would be talking with them, talking to their lender, and the lender might say, yep, all we have to do is verify their employment, then we're good to go. That's 99% certain they still work there. We're all good. They're going to be able to close on time. But for instance, if the appraisal isn't back, or there's something in underwriting that is still open, the seller, again, if you haven't extended that commitment period, and now you're, supposed to close and they can't close, the seller doesn't have to be a nice person. They don't have to say, oh, we'll give you another week. They can just say, hey, you were supposed to close this day, you didn't close, the deposits are now ours because we didn't protect their deposit. So everybody get that? Any questions, Lisa?
Yes.
Okay.
So it also says in the contract that after X number of days, and I think 5 is the default, that they're going to apply for their loan.
Mm-hmm.
So that 5 days comes before most home inspections.
Yep.
So how do you handle that? And if they wait 10 days, then are they out of contract, and could the deposit be held for that?
That's a good question. I think you would be instructing your client to apply for their loan pretty much immediately and kind of get that ball going. I've never seen ever anyone ever kind of bring that up, like when they've actually applied. So I mean, it's there, but I mean, you know, in 500 transactions, I've never had anybody ever ask to see like, oh, when did you send in? So again, I mean, it's there, and technically they could be in violation in default if they didn't close. But I don't know practically if anyone ever like checks that. But it's a good question. Claren, any questions? You understand it all? I knew that. Amy? Good?
No.
Anybody on Periscope with any questions? All right, so remember, you know, when you execute that contract, put down those dates so that you as the buyer's agent know when those 2 dates are coming.
I have a spreadsheet.
You know, and, or post-it notes, or, you know, as a company gets a little bit bigger, you know, we may actually have something where we send out an automated email reminding everyone, but, you know, that's yet to come. But, all right, well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Cool.
Well, that was fast.
I don't know, it's just kind of a straightforward thing if everybody sort of, I don't know, I mean.
Oh, I forgot to mention another thing I noticed on one deal. Was ending the inspection period, I think on like on a Saturday or